leave it like it is. Okay, we're going to leave it like it is. Okay, everybody, let's begin to hear our first story. So the first story on my list is Deborah Kaplan's The Pool on Ocean Avenue.
Thanks. It's Denise. Kaplan. Okay, thank you. I'll just start. In July of 1978, every day was filled with lazily sleeping late, pouring salt on slugs, applying calamine lotion to mosquito bites, peeling off white bits of burned flesh, and filling ice cube trays with orange juice. But the best thing about summer was having a backyard with a pool. The pool, the star of our Brooklyn backyard bonanza, the creme de la creme, the jewel in the crown of our block was our pool. That magnificent body of water of my youth was 4.5 feet of above-ground majesty. In a simpler time, before there was TikTok and selfies, and before we discovered boys and smoking and roller skating and disco, we had water, and it was all we needed. My father swelled with pride over the swing set he built, which is a total death trap, and the hydrangeas that lined our driveway that looked like pink cheerleader pom-poms. But his crowning achievement was his pool, easily viewed over a low fence by all the neighbors, green with envy and sweat. Our backyard was mostly concrete with a patch of dull green astroturf, where my sisters and I used to peel away the edge and expose a mini biome of worms, ants, and pill bugs. Then we would poke the poor creatures with punk sticks. There was a weeping willow whose tendrils reached down into the pool like fingers to caress the water at night. During those hot summer nights, green spotlights lit up the willow just like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The pool had no heater, and we stayed in the water until we were trembling, our skin like braille, and our lips nearly white. My father built a deck at one end of the pool, although the word deck makes it sound grander than it was. The deck was about 4 feet by 4 feet, but large enough so my two sisters and I could stand shoulder to shoulder and jump in together holding hands. Our other favorite trick was to stand with our backs to the pool, arms outstretched, and take the nesty plunge. One day, my sister Christine, the reckless one, ran into the house screaming, "I have an idea." She came back out with Elefante, a small blue plastic elephant with wheels on his feet. He was a toddler's riding toy left over from our younger days. We thought we were saying elephant in French when we named him. Christine positioned Elefante as far back on the deck as possible and sat on the toy with her 14-year-old body. Elefante was built for a 2-year-old, so he was a noticeably short elephant, and when she straddled him, her pelvis was positioned lower than her knees, and her legs were spread wide. It looked slightly like she was giving birth to him. "Here I go," she screamed and took off, wet feet slapping, trying to pick up speed. I think she must have envisioned herself sailing through the air on the back of Elefante, Dukes of Hazzard style, but Elefante's wheels caught on the very edge of the deck. He got stuck, bucked his hindquarters, and dunked my sister headfirst into the pool, then toppled in on her while she caught a mouthful of chlorine water. She was not deterred. She had a better idea. With lobster red arms hanging over the edge of the pool, I watched as she stumbled inside the house again and came back with Hoppity Horse, another leftover toddler's toy. Hoppity Horse was made of an industrial-strength, heavy-duty yellow rubber and was roughly the size of a wrecking ball with a horse's head. It had handles sticking out the sides of the head and black, vacant eyes. This was an indoor toy. The point of Hoppity Horse was to sit on it with the head sticking out of your crotch, hold on to the head sticks, and bounce around the house while possibly learning how to masturbate. But Christine had other plans for him. She climbed the 5 steps of the deck with Hoppity and shoved him between her thighs. Standing there on the deck, with a yellow horse head sticking out of her coochie and a giant yellow rubber ball coming out of her ass like a cartoon fart, she took her peach-colored nose plugs, adjusted them to either side of her nose, and squeezed her nostrils shut. One hand on Hoppity Horse handle, one hand in the air, she screamed a very nasal 1, 2. She bent her knees deeply. And on 3, she launched straight up into the air with a splash. The positively buoyant giant rubber ball shot back up to the surface like a breaching whale, but at an angle, and flung my sister into the side wall of the pool. Unfazed, Christine half swam, half flopped back to the deck, a bit bruised and possibly a little concussed, to try again. But I was already on the deck with Hoppity between my own legs. I had lost my nose plugs in the depths of the pool already, so I held one Hoppity stick, and with the other hand, I squeezed my nose. Not wanting to make the same mistake as my sister, I angled my body and leaned forward. When I jumped, I leaned a bit too far forward and landed in the water on my face and belly. My hand instinctively let go of the Hoppity, and when we hit the water, he bounced backwards and hit my sister square in the nose plugs. Don't worry, she was fine, and all summer, and for many summers after that, with zero parental supervision, our goal was to jump into the pool with Hoppity Horse between our legs and stay on, riding him like Poseidon's bucking bronco, but we never could break that noble steed. That's it.
Thank you, Denise.
That's cute.
Next up is Glenn Moss.
Okay, thank you. This is Lessons from a Dead Moth. Long ago, my encounters with nature and the creatures of the earth consisted of my silent stalking of fields and Prospect Park with a butterfly net. In early morning and near dusk, I would wait patiently, watching for the flutter and glimpse of movement and color. Purple against a deepening green, a splash of yellow-orange on the thinnest hint of white, a mauve prayer of opening and closing wings as a flower sways with more than a morning breeze. But believers in long balance have told me the end game. When my earthly time is over, my soul will be captured by a million sticky feet as it seeks final release. The silent beating of millions of wings mocking me as their rainbow dust covers my mouth and eyes, so my cries will not be heard, and I will be denied even the briefest glimpse of what I have lost, carrying me to a cracked expanse of dry and forgotten earth. With the slow pleasure of eternal redress, my soul is lowered to an awaiting space, where the antenna of all my former recipients of pinched death pin me forever, so that I may ever know the fate I so willingly dispensed with formaldehyde. It is within this time, and that sealed my fate, and that my story unfolds. I am walking in Prospect Park when spring is beginning to outpace the tiring plod of winter. I know what I seek and where to look. There in that copse to the left, just enough away from the path to escape disturbance, at least disturbance that is unintended. But my intent is clear. I find the chrysalis. It is heavy and fat from metamorphosis and building desire to be free. I have other plans. I break the branch to which the life-transforming case is bound by hardened, once wet lines spun from a mouth now changed and ready for life again. But I have other plans. In my apartment, I've taken a cardboard box given to me by Mr. Clifford, who owned the small toy store on Flatbush Avenue. I placed a green mesh net over the top to allow air and a captor's gaze to get in. Whether this effort was made for a school project or simply for me, I can't remember. I don't have a recollection of any academic purpose. My guess is, understanding me then, as I have come to know myself more, living as I did in my own meshed box of fears and isolation, I may have been seeking comfort from bringing a shared existence to a creature I could control. I placed the branch inside the box and waited. Within 2 days, the chrysalis began to rock back and forth, evidence of pushing from within appearing at several points. When I returned from a brief errand outside, I saw the cecropia moth emerging. Smiling, I ran outside and across the street to the park. I gathered what plants, flowers, and stems I thought useful and necessary. I returned home and placed them inside the box. The moth was sitting on the branch, still flexing its newly discovered wings, so large and lush with color. Watching as the moth fully opened its wings and was motionless, I had a vision of what this moment would be had I not taken the chrysalis. The moth would sense its place, its time, its purpose. Here, except for the uprooted plants and flowers, it received only the passing of the subway and my heated breath. Over the next few days, I could come home and see if it had eaten any of the new plants and flowers I brought in from the park. I thought it was feeding, at least that's what I told myself. And then I noticed a change in behavior. The moth attached itself to the side of the box and its fat brown body began to pulse. I didn't know what was happening. Maybe it was dying and I had served only to hasten a death. But then I saw something beginning to emerge, small pinkish masses, eggs. The moth was following a path stored inside of it and was laying eggs. First in one part of the box, then it moved, and over half the box was covered with small pools of pink. Looking back, I like to think it was this egg laying that moved me, but I can't really be sure. What I do know is that I decided to take the moth out of the box and let it be free within the apartment. Whatever impulse I had to allow the moth to live more than its box existence, I didn't go so far as to take it to the park and release it. Instead, much to my mother's consternation, I would take the moth from the box and let it fly about when I was home. It would land on my bed, on my books, and more on me, often on my shoulder, like some trained bird. I would walk around the apartment with the moth on my shoulder, and my parents would look at me, as they too often did, as if I was something too perplexing to communicate with. They asked me to put the moth back in the box. I would comply, but always seek that moment when I could free it, but never completely. Over the next 3 weeks, I would bring back new plants and flowers and take the moth out. I convinced myself it was happy and was living longer than it might in the park, where birds or some other predator than me would kill it. One day I came back and looked into the box. The moth was lying motionless on the bottom. I reached in and touched it, moved it. It was dead. I kept saying it. I never named it. I took the moth out and brought it to my mother in the kitchen. She looked at the moth in my hand and quickly suggested the incinerator, that handy crucible offering a swift ride to cremation. I had no other ideas. Burying it in the park did not occur to me. So I found a brown paper bag, put the moth inside, and walked to the incinerator room on the fourth floor hallway, opened up the door. As I reached for the chute to open, I looked at the bag and thought about what I had done and relived my moments with my moth. I placed the bag at the lip of the chute and gently pushed it forward. I watched it slide down and into the sooty shaft, down into the smoldering mass of garbage in the basement. Later, when I went outside and looked up at my building, I saw gray smoke coming from the vent on the roof. The smoke spread, mostly drifting over to Eastern Parkway. A few wisps, though, maybe pushed by a wind I could feel on the street, moved over my head and to the park. I tell myself now that I believe the burned remains of the moth were in those wisps. Maybe I did, because I never went butterfly catching again. And that's the end.
Thank you, Glenn. Pam Torraco has the next story.
I live in Michigan, not Brooklyn. I'm a retired psychotherapist, and one of my enjoyments in retirement has been to start writing again, which I hadn't done for many years. A new life in Brooklyn. I'm getting married and moving to Brooklyn. My 67-year-old father's enthusiasm came through clearly as he made his announcement in one of his rare phone calls to me from 600 miles away. To whom, I stammered, my shock nearly blocking my voice. He had been widowed almost 20 years earlier, when he was 48 and I was 11. Each of us had lost our favorite person and our anchor, and had struggled hard as we adjusted to our new lives. After I left for college, knowing that I had to separate from him for a time in an attempt to find myself, he had lived for years as a semi-recluse. So, for the first time, I was hearing his sweet, almost unbelievable story. A few years before he met my mother, my dad, Pete, had been engaged to a woman named Jessie. The engagement was broken, and the couple parted ways. But they had met again recently, 35 years later. I was born and raised in West Hempstead in Nassau County. Our family of 3 was a relatively happy and well-functioning unit. My dad was a hardworking aeronautical engineer, and my mom, a former teacher, enjoyed being a homemaker and engaging in her many art projects. But when she got breast cancer, everything changed. Following a mastectomy and radiation, both of which were rather brutal and debilitating at that time, she was never the same. Pete took loving care of his wife until her death less than a year later. He then responsibly attended to the tough tasks of dealing with his own grief and raising a confused child teenager. I think he understood my need to go away to college to find some distance from our difficult relationship. But it was painful for him, and I felt guilty leaving him alone. Nonetheless, he remained supportive of my endeavors, and we were usually together during school breaks. He kept the house, fully expecting that I would return. While he waited, Pete lived mostly quite alone with few friends and little social contact outside of his work. I, along with relatives and friends, expressed concern about him, but he brushed us off and politely refused offers of help. While he could be quite personable and had a wonderful sense of humor, he was also very stubborn and probably rather depressed. He dated only one woman that I ever knew of, and that relationship was short-lived. I, meanwhile, had completed college and graduate school and was living and working in Michigan. So I sat down and took a deep breath as my dad continued his amazing story on the phone. My alone and lonely father had been surprised when an old friend had invited him to his home in Long Beach. Others were there too, people he had known many years earlier. And there, while swimming in the Atlantic Ocean, Pete and Jesse reconnected 35 years after their separation. Jessie had never married and still lived in the Brooklyn apartment she had shared with her parents as a teenager near Grand Army Plaza. Following a short courtship, the couple planned their simple wedding. I don't remember what I said to my dad when he finished his story, but I hope I managed to find enough voice to congratulate him. I do remember asking for a few more details about Jessie, hoping that this woman I'd never met was a good choice and not one that might further hurt and disappoint this tough yet vulnerable man. The wedding day arrived, and it touched me when Pete asked me to help him dress for his big day. A radiant Jessie walked down the aisle of a Brooklyn church on the arm of her brother. It was a happy event for our family and for Jessie's. Jessie retired. Pete had already done so several years earlier. He sold his car and his Long Island house and happily moved into the Brooklyn apartment. Jessie took to calling my dad Petey, which he apparently didn't mind, and she quickly set about improving his tired wardrobe. My dad, the better cook, set about making regular dinners for two. He loved to walk, so he and his shopping cart put in several miles every week, returning with groceries. He took well to city living and soon looked and sounded more relaxed than he had in years. For the next 20 plus years, the couple explored together much of the metropolitan New York area, especially Brooklyn and Manhattan. They went to concerts, shows, operas, museums, restaurants. Pete became the darling of the apartment house. He delivered newspapers to residents who couldn't get out themselves. And every week he made a cake from a Betty Crocker cake mix, delivering an eagerly anticipated slice to friends in 3D, 12C, 9F, etc. Jessie and Pete were subway regulars, and they often took the train to visit relatives in Jersey and Westchester. They went on several cruises and trips to Europe, sending me smiling photos of themselves with the ship's captain or with new friends they'd made. When they visited my husband and me, I could only smile when I heard them giggling upstairs in bed. I had grown up with regular visits to Manhattan and the Bronx Zoo, but I had no connections to Brooklyn. Pete and Jessie introduced me to the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, the Brooklyn Museum, Prospect Park, and Grand Army Plaza, among other attractions, happy to share their love of the borough. They had enjoyed many dinners at the Montauk Club, So I arranged a 90th birthday there for my dad, and 40 members of both families spent a splendid afternoon celebrating. Pete and Jesse lived quite contentedly together for a few more years in their vintage, rent-controlled, beloved Grand Army Plaza apartment. Brooklyn truly gave my father a second chance and a new life. He was grateful, and so am I.
Thank you, Pam. Well, I know what, Gabrielle Miranda is here. And Gabrielle,
Yes.
we're looking forward to hearing your story.
I'm very excited to share it. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Gabriel. I'm a poet, religious anthropologist, and wellness practitioner living in the Bushwick/Ridgewood area, such as the way. I'm going to share with you my work called "The Bones They Walk," and I begin with a Haitian proverb, "Zo li marche," which also means "the bones they walk." I know I'm not supposed to be here. At least that's what I tell myself. I tell myself my skin is too white to be Caribbean. My words too clean from the grit found in our shared roots to be called real. I guess the best way to say this is I've fallen prey to the colonial project, to its divisiveness, and the way it makes you question who you are. I tell myself I'm not supposed to be here in Brooklyn at a festival to celebrate the family of Loire, the Ezili. I'm not fit to celebrate the spirits of love because love left me a long time ago. The story of Spanish conquest is not unknown, and you don't need to hear it from me again. What you do need to hear is how wrong it is to cut yourself from your own shared root. How other plants will send life to support that self-same root whose stem has been severed. I'm on a roof of an old industrial building turned event space in Prospect Lefferts Garden, feeling compelled to dance. The drums are thundering and the Haitian woman's song is electrifying the air. My vision is hazy, my heart storming in time with the music's tempo. Dum takum dum dum takum. Vibrating my bones, the rhythm pulls my blood like the tide. I don't remember too much about what happens next. I only remember colors and lights, rose petals in a whirlwind of summer fervency. I remember the breath of bittersweet tears like sweat rolling down my face. Calls of Aibo sounding in my ears and the heady rush of lotion Pompeia filling my nose. There was nothing but the ghosts of roses swirling past my skin. Head thrown back as my hand ran down my neck. It was, my limbs moved, but I couldn't make out how. All I knew was that in that moment, my body was not mine. I do remember, though, what happened after. I fell back from a circle of people who are holding space for those who are being taken by the spirit of the dance. I stumbled, completely and utterly exhausted, into the waiting hands of a kind Haitian woman I had met earlier that night. Gabriel, are you okay? Ayo, move, come this way. Do you need water? I shake my head too full of rumbling petals and tears. Ah, no, I think I'm okay. Let me just sit down. She brings me over to a stool while others crowd around to help her carry me. My legs are heavy, my body listless, as if the spirit took all of her strength with me. Another woman comes near me. She seems to be a friend of the first woman I met that evening. They speak with great love in Haitian Creole, and I'm able to understand a few words here and there with the help of my college French. The new woman looks over to me and smiles. How are you feeling? I'm all right. Still very tired and a little woozy, but otherwise. She laughs gently. Yes, they can do that to you. She takes a moment to look at me. I feel anxiety rippling across my skin. Not from her, no. Her eyes were too warm for that. But I don't know what came over me to dance like that. It happened so suddenly, though I don't want anything to do that offended the tradition. She smiles and scoffs lightly. No, you danced beautifully. I can see what had happened. Where are you from? You moved with steps similar to our own. I was born and raised here in the city. but my family is from Puerto Rico. Her lips shape into a knowing tilt. I imagine her eyes shining a bit brighter. You know some Creole too. You look like you understand some things. Ah no, Creole. Mais je parle un peu de français. C'est pour ça que je peux comprendre. A hearty laugh leaves her and she looks over to her friend beside her. Same root then. Simple as that. No grandiose explanation, no judgment, no pushing away for not being a part of the larger community, no gatekeeping, no need even to unnecessarily coddle one 20-something-year-old's bruised identity. With one clean phrase, the mental gymnastics of belonging was paused mid-flight. Here on the rooftop in the heart of Brooklyn, people who've come from places so unique are gathered to dance for love. People born from islands vastly different from one another, whose histories are ripe with their own villains and heroes, their own spirits and lovers. Puerto Rico, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, same root. Nacido de la misma raíz, né de la même sang, born from the same root. Simple. I guess I am right where I'm supposed to be. And that's it.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Gabriel. Wonderful stories. I'm enjoying this. Dawn? Oh, Dawn's the one person who's not here. Well, we'll have to think about her story. It's entitled Danish Pancakes in Brooklyn. We'll have to find out what that's about. So next up, Jay Feldman.
Howdy.
Hey,
I'm
Jay.
I'm a retired writer living in Northern California. My work has appeared in many national, regional, and local publications, and I've written several books. I've written for television. This is from Confessions of a Red Diaper Baby. On the surface, we were like most other Jewish families in the neighborhood, hardworking, education-oriented, upward striving. But hidden behind this facade of normalcy lurked a closely guarded secret that we carried with us daily, and our true identities were allowed free expression only when we were among our own kind. So here it is. I grew up in a communist household. I was a red diaper baby. It was no easy thing growing up in a communist family in Brooklyn in the 1950s. This was a fractious time, the height of the McCarthy era, that censurable epoch in American life when the fearmongers and witch hunters were conducting a frenzied search for subversives under every rock, and the most casual association with red-tainted people, causes, or organizations anywhere along the line. Are you now, or have you ever been? Was enough to damn a person's life and career. In fact, my parents had close friends who went to jail for their politics. These weren't bomb throwers, for Christ's sakes. These were ordinary, decent working people who played softball and drank Coca-Cola and fought against Hitler in World War II. They didn't go to jail for violent criminal activities. They went to jail for their ideas. Truly, right here in the land of the free, with the brave, people we knew were being sent to the slammer for their thoughts. These folks were idealists, utopians, whose concern was to build a new and better world. Their revolution was far more a theoretical than a violent one. Sure, there were strikes and rallies, picket lines and demonstrations, but mounting the barricades to overthrow the United States government was not part of the program. The movement was based rather on a discontent with what were accurately perceived to be the inequalities of the capitalist system, a feeling of compassion for the oppressed and dispossessed of the world, and a vision of the future in which an evolved human family lived in universal peace and harmony. The problem was that I didn't know the implications of many of the details of our everyday lives. So I would sometimes accidentally let the cat out of the bag and then find myself in hot water, which is what happened around holiday time when my third grade teacher, Mrs. McDonald, asked the class if anyone could say Merry Christmas in another language. I raised my hand and she called on me. I recited half a dozen different Merry Christmases. That's wonderful, she bubbled. Where did you ever learn all of these? From the children's page of the Daily Worker, I answered proudly. Suddenly, her eyes narrowed to slits. Stand up, she commanded sharply. I was stunned. Well, what had I done now? What caused this sudden, utterly unexpected change in her behavior? Are you a communist? She demanded. Whoops. Uh-oh. I got the picture all too clearly. I remembered only now, too late, that the Daily Worker was one of those verboten subjects that we never mentioned outside the house. The drop of the C word, a hush had fallen over the class. My head was spinning. I stalled for time. Mrs. McDonald repeated her question more deliberately and urgently this time. Are you a communist? I knew better than to answer directly. I don't know, I said weakly. What do you mean you don't know? She insisted. Are you or aren't you a communist? Out of pure fright, I held my ground. I don't know. And so it went. Are you a communist? I don't know. Over and over, until Mrs. McDonald, seeing that I wasn't going to crack, gave up and told me to sit down. Of course, it didn't end there. I was now a marked man, and Mrs. McDonald went out of her way to make my life miserable. If I talked out of turn, she hit me on the knuckles with her ruler, or made me stand with my back to the blackboard and bounced my head against it. For a long time, I refrained from telling my mother about this abuse because I didn't want her to know I'd spilled the beans. Finally, though, after months of being picked on, I couldn't hold it in any longer. When I told my mother what had been going on, she called the principal, Mr. Edelson, and set up an appointment to see him and Mrs. McDonald together. Mr. Edelson was a decent, weary-seeming man in his 50s, who always looked as if he was trying to figure out what mistake he'd made earlier in his life that had resulted in his being where he was now. He had a sense of resignation about him that made you feel guilty about any happiness you might have. Mr. Edelson, caught in the middle, played the role of peacemaker. He's a communist, snarled Mrs. McDonald, pointing at me. He quotes from the Daily Worker. I doubt very much that the Communist Party solicits membership from 8-year-olds, said Mr. Edelson, looking even wearier than usual. Are you a communist? Mrs. McDonald asked my mother. That's none of your goddamn business, my mother shot back. And don't you ever lay a hand on him again. I'll take you to court. The principal knew he had a side with him. I assure you, Mrs. Feldman, there'll be no more of that, he offered. Isn't that so, Mrs. McDonald? She made no response, and not wanting to show her up any further, Mr. Edelson said, then we all understand each other. I consider the matter closed. After that, Mrs. McDonald pretty much left me alone. But I could tell by the look in her eyes that she hated my guts and was always waiting for me to step out of line in order to have a good excuse to persecute me. So I learned to always be looking over my shoulder. The most difficult part of growing up a red diaper baby was feeling I had to hide who I was. That was balanced out by the sense of belonging when we were with our own kind of people and the shared sense of being part of a movement to build a better world. The idealism, the humanism stayed with me. And with time, the greatest legacy of my red diaper childhood became knowing that it's okay to heed the inner voice, to march to a different drummer, if indeed you hear one. I heard one then, I hear one still. And thanks to my upbringing, I'm still marching to a syncopated beat.
Thank you, Jay. I lived in an apartment building on the Eastern Parkway where we'd have the Daily Worker delivered to our door. This was in the 70s.
It came in a plain brown wrapper, though.
Yeah, but everybody in the building got it. The higher echelons of the workers lived in the building. Anyway, that was great. Um, Michelle Ann Mangan, it's
Hello,
up to you, girl.
thank you. This is called The Best Job I Ever Had Gave Me Bed Bugs. The year was 2008. Obama had just been elected president of the United States. Brooklyn felt like the most exciting place in the world to call home. I was 25 and a new teacher in the New York City public schools. My workplace was a sturdy brick schoolhouse in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, that housed 1,200 students. I rode my bike to this sturdy brick building every morning at approximately 6:45 a.m., crossing the Gowanus Canal and Carroll Gardens and heading south down 4th Avenue, all the way to 47th Street. I loved watching the neighborhoods of Brooklyn wake up each morning. I can still smell the cool, wet air of those early morning bike rides down 4th Avenue. Once I arrived at my school, I didn't get the luxury of working in the actual school building. My classroom was in the excess building, one of those haphazard trailers in the back of overstuffed schools that are built to house the overflow of extra kids. There were only 6 classrooms in this trailer. But I loved being in this excess building. The other teachers and I formed an immediate bond as if we were the school rejects. Few other people bothered me in my classroom, so I got to spend my days all alone with a group of 25 second graders. We created a little haven together in that space, with reading nooks and free time Fridays. Our class song was Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles, and we sang it together every morning. It didn't matter that the heat never quite worked or that we often had to wear our coats during lessons. It didn't matter that if someone ran the coffee machine and the microwave at the same time, the fuse would blow in the whole trailer. A lot of other duties as assigned start popping up when you work as a teacher in an urban school district. You're expected to be a janitor, a nurse, a social worker, and sometimes a pest control specialist. During a nasty period when thousands of bed bugs scuffled across apartment buildings in Brooklyn, I tried to avoid bringing home an invasion by hanging my backpack from a hook on the back of my classroom door. It was a little like going camping and hanging your food from a bear pole. All day, I would see those flat-bodied brown bugs crawling from my students' clothes on our reading rug. They would hide in the seams of their backpacks. We had to go to extreme efforts to control this outbreak, including storing our students' belongings in black garbage bags when they arrived each morning. In fact, the city asked us, the teachers, to collect these bed bugs in Scotch tape and mail them into the central office for some sort of entomological public health research project. I thought I had escaped unscathed from this bedbug evasion until I found a single bedbug crawling across my own apartment's living room rug one afternoon, and the rest was history. My roommate and I threw out our bedding and paid for exterminators to leave a toxic white powder along our baseboards. We cleaned out our closets and washed everything we owned. To this day, I still can't sleep in a hotel room without checking the sides of the mattresses. But all of these inconveniences were worth it to me. I was doing something I loved. It was the first time in my young life that I'd poured myself so fully into something and truly loved the process. I wasn't just studying to get good grades like I had in college, and I definitely wasn't working for the money, but I loved planning ways to light up the faces of those 25 kids each day. I loved the constant creativity and the full body exhaustion of the work. Even my weekends were filled with thoughts of my students. Every Saturday morning, I would wake up late in my garden level Burham Hill apartment and haul my laundry over to the laundromat. While I waited, I would plan a week's worth of lessons from a window seat in my local coffee shop on Henry Street. Then I would bring my laundry back home, return to the coffee shop, and keep working through dinner. My roommate even gave me a gift certificate to that coffee shop for Christmas that year. I spent an unreasonable portion of my small income on lattes and chicken salad wraps that year. Every teacher I know has a few students that stand out in their memory. Often these are the students that struggled the most, or perhaps the students who needed us the most. My student's name was Silvana. She was sad and lethargic, her dark hair uncombed. She lived in a crowded apartment with her mom and 6 siblings in Sunset Park. Silvana was beautiful with deep brown eyes. She was the kind of kid whose eyes used to light up when she got a few minutes of adult attention. She was also very behind in her reading, and I spent hours sitting next to her desk practicing her short vowel sounds with her. but she was easily frustrated and unsure of herself. She improved that year, but she never quite mastered reading as much as I'd hoped she would. But Silvana loved our field trips. I started a tradition that year of taking my students on a walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. We would walk halfway across the bridge, gather in a circle, and draw the skyline of Manhattan in our art notebooks. When we returned to school, I would cover one of our classroom walls with all of my students' variations on the New York City skyline. I still remember walking that bridge next to Silvana on a windy spring day in 2008 and looking at the buildings of Manhattan together. I remember feeling so lucky that my life had led me to that moment, looking out at this beautiful city and standing next to this little girl that I felt so lucky to know. That year, I was just one teacher in a giant school system. All of the problems surrounding me, the Great Recession, countless school reforms, and even a bedbug invasion barely bothered me. I was too busy doing something I loved. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Deborah Schupack,
Hi,
we're looking
thank you.
forward to hearing your story.
Thank you. And I've excerpted this from a longer piece, so I'm going to read sort of the bulk of the beginning, and then I'm going to fast forward a little bit to the end of this section. So this is called the COVID Cavalry. Early March 2020, 9:45 a.m. Midwood, Brooklyn. At the regularly scheduled bed board meeting to discuss the upcoming day at Mount Sinai, Brooklyn, Hospital President Scott Lauren addressed the pandemic on the horizon. He pulled no punches, as Chief Nursing Officer Claudia Garcineau recalled. He said, "You guys can't imagine what it's going to be like. It's going to be bad." And he said, "People are going to get sick. We're going to get sick. People are going to die. Some people that we care about are going to die." Like many of her colleagues, Ms. Garcineau could not yet wrap her mind around it. "I thought, geez, you're being so pessimistic. Stop that. We're tougher than that," she said. I clearly remember thinking, it's not going to be that bad. And sure enough, in just a few weeks, it was. Parked on either side of the 3-story brick building were trucks that laid bare the life and death struggle inside this small hospital. There were 2 oxygen tankers to help COVID-19 patients breathe, and 2 morgue trucks to handle with as much dignity as possible the hundreds who would not survive the deadly virus. The hospital admitted its first known COVID-positive patient March 9th. By March 16th, the number of COVID admissions was doubling every 2 or 3 days, peaking in early April. Staff came to care for 50% more patients than usual, most all of them COVID patients. The emergency department cared for 90 patients at any given time with only 16 bays. On April 1st, there were 35 cardiac arrests or emergencies, compared with the usual 2 or 3 a day. The first line of defense was the emergency department, ambulances streaming day and night to its humble entrance. The higher acuity patients were wheeled behind a protective curtain and into the bustling ED itself. The movable walls between bays were all accordioned open, stretcher after bed after stretcher packed together. The bays held more machinery and plugged directly into the hospital's store of oxygen, so that's where the sickest patients would go if they could fit. In the middle of the room were the less acute, but still acute, patients who could be on portable oxygen. Those who were less severe could be treated in the tent outside. Mount Sinai Brooklyn's ED had become a massive bottleneck. Normally, emergency clinicians stabilized patients and moved them upstairs, but now patients were coming in at double the volume. And with COVID patients, it was hard to tell when or if they could be considered stabilized. Meanwhile, COVID patients upstairs were not getting better and were not clearing out. In addition, the Brooklyn Hospital was seriously understaffed, with so many of its healthcare workers out sick with COVID or quarantining with symptoms. When the hospital asked to divert ambulances, something it doesn't like to do, but the small ED was bursting at the seams. The city declined. There was nowhere else to send people, no nearby hospital, less overwhelmed. It was the perfect storm, said ED nursing director Bobby Lynch. As Mount Sinai Brooklyn went from bad to worse, gone were such clinical luxuries as checking on each ventilator 3 or 4 times in a shift, said Vadim Leko, a respiratory therapist who was in charge of monitoring the hospital's oxygen usage. You just responded to emergencies, going from one room to another, he said. And there were some instances when we responded and it was too late. COVID most often manifested as a respiratory disease, constricting the ability to breathe. On a macro level, the hospital itself mirrored the human struggle with oxygen. Normally, Mount Sinai Brooklyn is served by one external oxygen tanker known as an oxygen farm. But after refueling demands proved too frequent, Mr. Leko requested another portable tanker on wheels, which sat outside the hospital's emergency entrance, doubling its oxygen. The backup supply of portable oxygen cylinders was refilled every day rather than the usual once or twice a week, and went from an average of 70 cylinders on hand to 275. The oxygen farm was working so hard that its ventilator coils were icing over as they labored to convert the negative 300-degree liquid oxygen to a usable, breathable gas. The nimble, if overwhelmed, hospital quickly stationed someone next to the oxygen farm to pour hot water on vaporizers around the clock until employees could rig a solution, securing a hose over the vaporizers to keep a steady stream of hot water, ensuring the flow of oxygen from tanker to lung. I'm going to fast forward to the end of the essay, which chronicles how slowly things got a little bit better. The key to the turnaround came when staff from other Mount Sinai hospitals and outside temp workers were redeployed to Brooklyn, almost 200 of them. Nurses from the New York Eye and Ear Infirmary helped out medical teams. Plastic surgeons worked in the ICU. 90 temporary visiting staff came to Brooklyn from all over the country. They worked in new positions outside comfort zones at all hours of the day and night. It was like the cavalry came, said Bobby Lynch. Outside staff included what's known as CRNAs, Certified Registered Nurse Anesthetists, a much needed clinical force during a pandemic that steals breath. Visiting CRNAs brought Vadim Leko his first moment of hope during the pandemic. Early April, sunrise. He had been at the hospital all night, in fact, for many days on end. Now he was going to meet 3 new CRNAs reporting for duty at Mount Sinai Brooklyn's east-facing glass-fronted lobby. The sun is coming up on that side, so it's very bright and warm that early in the morning, Vadim recalled. They walked in and just said, "Hi, we're here. We're CRNAs." For the first time in days, Vadim Leko got to go home and sleep in his own bed. The end.
Thank you, Deborah. Next is Ellen Levitt. Ellen, welcome on board.
Cheers. Okay, this is from looking back at high school. I learned a lot when I attended Edward R. Murrow High School. I read and discussed excellent novels and poetry, learned from a particularly good Algebra 2 teacher for most of that year, studied physics and chemistry, worked on black and white photography darkroom techniques. I learned how to create a film storyboard. I took independent study courses and learned self-paced course study habits. I lifted weights and practiced basic yoga sequences in phys ed. I learned engraving using noisy tools and on plastic and metal. I participated in student government and the senior year varsity sing show as a pianist. I made all types of friends from a variety of ethnicities and abilities, including special education students. I earned money by working in the after-school tutoring center and delivering newspapers on campus. But when I reminisce with my high school friends and even my daughters, they attended the same school. What do I talk about the most? The less savory incidents, the urban woes incidents, the gross outs. Here are 2 of them that have made me laugh the most. In junior year, I had physics class first thing in the morning. I sat at a lab table with Lenny, Robert, and Rosemary. Yep, I still remember them. We always perched on stools, writing our notes in binders. One day, all four of us noticed a roach walking across our table. The other three kids flinched, but I removed my penny loafer and I smacked it down on the table, killing the insect. The whole class gawked at me, and I announced, I just killed a roach. I got a round of applause for that. In senior year, during part of each day, a few younger students sat in front of my locker. When I would ask them to move aside so I could open my locker, they would roll their eyes and barely scoot over. One day I stood on tiptoes and tried to remove my combination lock, and it fell down on one girl's head. I apologized, but she wouldn't accept it, and I reminded her that she had barely moved over for me. Later that day, one of the girl's friends confronted me, a tough young kid. "You hit my friend with your lock," she announced, and then she challenged me to a fight. We both had our friends surrounding us. I looked at her and I said, "Okay, I'll fight you, but I have a few rules. No biting, no scratching, and no pulling hair." The girl looked at me, dumbfounded. I repeated my fight rules and added, "And we're going outside to fight in the playground or the parking lot across the street because I have a really good reputation in this school." The girl said, "You're fucking nuts," and walked away. No fight. My friends were bug-eyed. When I tell other people these two incidents, their reactions fall into two main categories. If the person I tell this to went to school in Brooklyn or Queens or Staten Island, they laugh or say something that shows a sense of been there, done that. If I tell people who attended private school in or outside of New York City, they look at me like I went to the most poverty-ridden, nasty school. I didn't. In fact, Morrow was and is considered one of the better public high schools in New York City, let alone Brooklyn. These two incidents are part of me, part of being a lifelong Brooklynite, and I say this with a dollop of affection. I enjoyed my high school years greatly for the most part, and look back at them fondly. But I realize that many other people hear stories about roaches and almost getting into fights, and they look down at me and at my schooling, at my adolescence. They don't think these are humorous stories, but consider them to be pathetic tales and seem to think that I'm trying to make myself feel better for attending a subpar educational institution. Did I attend a crappy inner city school and I'm making myself feel good about the experience? Is being old school Brooklyn a thing to feel ashamed about? In recent years, Brooklyn has been recast as this trendy place, a multicultural patchwork quilt with many cool places to visit, eat, and drink, grab a coffee to go. I do appreciate that. But many people don't remember when we were mocked for being from Brooklyn, when we were chuckled at for saying coffee in New York, and I still do. I cannot help it. My feelings about going to a public high school in Brooklyn are somewhat complex, and even as a teenager, I realized the pros and cons. During my sophomore year, there was a transit strike, and for a few days, we were told to show up at our local schools for attendance. Morrow was my local school, so I did show up at Morrow. I was Zone A, but other kids didn't because they lived far away and couldn't bike over or get driven to school by their parents. Reminiscing about one's high school days isn't solely a Brooklyn thing, but there is something about going to a large urban public high school that shapes you. You realize that life isn't always easy and smooth. I've seen people look down at this or wrinkle their noses and even condemn it. Yeah. I've seen other people cheer it along as school of hard knocks. These comments are overly simplistic. Attending high school in Brooklyn is a more nuanced experience or set of experiences than most people want to admit. This amount of choice, degree of autonomy, shaped me and my peers. My years at a large public high school in Brooklyn could have been better, but could have been worse. Those years, that school, the teachers and students and courses and activities all helped to launch me forward into our society. They helped me become a practical person who embraces learning, but also has a sense of humor, because you always need a sense of humor. Hey.
Thanks.
All right.
Those are great. Memory lane. Eileen Donovan is next. Eileen, we're looking forward to your story.
Hi. Okay,
Hi,
Eileen
Eileen.
Donovan. My novel, I've written 3 traditionally published novels, 2 of which have won national awards, and my shorter pieces have appeared in various anthologies and editions of Chicken Soup for the Soul. This is an excerpt from my submission, A Stranger in My Own City, and it's about the day I moved into my apartment in Brighton Beach, an area that I had been assured was no longer predominantly Russian. And you can make your own judgment about that when I finish reading. The first sign of trouble appeared with my belongings. For starters, one of the 2 elevators in my building was out of order. As every writer knows, we travel with our own medium-sized bookstore. Boxes upon boxes of books and furniture all needed to go to the 13th floor. And it seemed that every tenant had gone out that day and were now all arriving back home and needed the elevator. As I stood in the lobby with my movers, I realized I was not endearing myself to anyone. The tenants pointed at my growing piles, their murmured grumblings getting louder. I let them take the elevator. After the 3rd pass on the elevator, my lead mover said, "We take next elevator, they wait." Tenants shouted at my movers shouted back at them, all in Russian, and I stood there frozen. A few of my new neighbors wagged fingers in my face and yelled at me. All I could say was, "I don't speak Russian," at which they would shake their heads and say something like, "Bah," although I'm pretty sure that wasn't it. One lady who squeezed into the elevator with the mover, the boxes, and me, asked him something in Russian, and he answered. When she got out on her floor, he said, "She from St. Petersburg." "Oh, did she tell you that?" I asked. "No, everyone from St. Petersburg. Very nice, very polite. Other people probably from Stalingrad." With that overarching summary of the Russian people, he smiled. This was not going well. We arrived at my floor, and I grabbed one of the boxes to prop the apartment door open when I heard a woman yelling. Stepping into the hall, I saw a tiny older woman charging toward the mover, shaking her fist and screaming at him, obviously distraught. Her outburst continued while this mountain of a man, a former professional Russian hockey player, looked down at her. Then, just as I thought she was winding down, he started yelling at her. Any dreams I had about détente with my neighbors evaporated. The day eventually came to a close. Now came the joy of trying to find a parking spot on the street. As I drove up and down various blocks, the weather changed and it started to pour rain. Not a light, misty rain. Oh no, this was monsoonal. There were a couple of restaurants on the boardwalk, so I found access and sloshed through the rain to find a place that would quiet my growling stomach. I spotted the yellow awning of one of the restaurants and headed for it. "Closed," the sign said. Gee, could this day get any better? By now I was soaked to the skin, but I didn't care. I was famished. I trudged to the next restaurant. Closed. Was this some kind of special Russian holiday I didn't know about? Back in my apartment, I grabbed my phone and Googled pizza. Thankfully, the place delivered. In about half an hour, a very wet delivery boy knocked on my door. I tipped him about a week's pay and dove into my dinner. To this day, I have no idea if it was any good, but right then it was the best pie I'd ever tasted. The next morning, I woke, anxious to get to the supermarket and stock up on some staples. Showered and dressed, I waited for the one working elevator. That's when a woman came out of her apartment and stormed down the hall towards me, shouting in Russian the whole way. This woman wasn't the tiny one from yesterday. This one was as big as my mover. As she got closer, she flailed her arms and continued yelling. I don't speak Russian, I said, my mantra for the future. You have too much furniture, she said in heavily accented English. I don't think so. I have just the right amount. Once again, I was assaulted with a torrent of babble. I still don't speak Russian, I said. I speaking English, she screeched. Really? Since I couldn't understand a word she said, I waited for her break in her tirade, then said, excuse me, and went back into my apartment. There was no way I was getting in the elevator with that crazy woman. Later that day, I made it to the supermarket, and I used that term lightly. This was a whole new experience. Instead of aisles of boxed and canned foods, there were long aisles of steam tables stocked with fully cooked items and refrigerated tables of cold food. Although I recognized some of the foodstuffs like salmon, coleslaw, and stew, although not sure what kind, the rest was a mystery. And since all the labels were in Russian, I had no idea what they were selling. People milled about filling takeout boxes with various items while I searched for normal food. Towards the rear of the store were a few shelves stocked with cans, jars, and packages, but most of them had Russian labels. The fresh meat department was about the length of my coffee table, but there was a decent selection of dairy products, although all the packaged cheeses had Russian labels, and lots of produce. I began to envision my life as a vegetarian. Another area where there was an abundance of product was the bakery. I wasn't sure if I'd ever seen such a variety of cakes and sweets, even in the best bakeries I knew. And they all looked so sugary, my teeth started to ache just standing at the counter. Opposite this display was an entire aisle of boxed candy. Again, all Russian labels. The abundance even outdid Walmart or Target right before Valentine's Day. So I grabbed some fruit, veggies, yogurt, eggs, and a loaf of some kind of bread. Yes, that had a Russian label too. And made my way home, my head spinning. Fortunately, there was plenty of leftover pizza, so I opened a bottle of wine and had dinner. I also made a resolution to find an American supermarket the next day. Thank you.
Thank you. Brighton Beach. Well, okay. Jose, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck to everyone. Congratulations. This is my entry called The Contender. Okay. When former fighter Tony Pallone found out that my last check was withheld, he turned to his friend and said, Lefty, let's go get this kid his money. It was the spring of 1988, and there was nothing but lint and a few dollars in my pockets. My father had just passed away, and I took a 9-to-5 for $3.50 an hour. 3 months into the job, I got fired for keeping my mouth shut. Pallone, Lefty, and I headed north under the McDonald Avenue L to collect my check. Me in front, the two of them behind like bodyguards. That triangle formation might have looked formidable in their youth when the boxer's clothes fit better and Lefty did not walk with a cane. If it were anyone other than the old welterweight with the dented nose, I would have respectfully declined. Instead, I remembered what Lefty once said about Pallone. Not only does he know all the wise guys, they all know him. I first heard of Pallone through my father. My father spoke about the boxers from his youth, including Pallone, who it turned out lived only 3 train stops away. His real name was Jerry, and because of his neighborhood friends, he was considered a mob fighter. Vinny the Chin Gigante was a childhood friend, and Tommy Ryan, future boss of the Genovese crime family, was his manager. Too young to box, Pallone used his brother Tony's ID and went on to set records at Madison Square Garden and headlined many Friday night fights. Vinny the Chin killed Tommy Ryan, Lefty told me. Hey, you don't know that, Pallone interrupted. Because of the Godfather film, Lefty continued. Joe Colombo edited the film. Pallone knew Colombo. I knew all those guys, Pallone replied. Then Lefty said, not only did he know them, they all knew him. When I first visited Pallone, he was living in Gravesend. His voice was gruff, his shoulders broad, and his face, filled with dents, dings, scars, and wrinkles, looked like a crumbled sheet of paper. I told him the old prize fighter who feeds birds on the boardwalk told me to look him up. I'm retired, Pallone retired. Tell him I closed that gym a while ago. I turned to leave when he asked, what's your father say about you boxing, kid? The grass hasn't grown on his grave yet, I replied. Give me a second, Pallone said, and closed the door. It opened a minute later, and Pallone, wearing a newsboy cap and a members-only jacket, said, come on, let's go to the gym. On the way, he lit a cigarette. My father smoked that brand, I told him. What'd he go of? Lung cancer. He put his cigarette out. I thought I'd never see the inside of one of these again, he said when we arrived at the gym. The older trainers stopped what they were doing when they saw Pallone. One by one, and with uncertainty, they approached. It had been about a decade since anyone had seen him. In the months that followed, we went to tournaments together, ate pasta and gravy on Sundays. We hung out with Jake LaMotta. We ate meatball sandwiches with Rocky Graziano. At the same deli where I ate those meatball sandwiches, a tough guy saw Pallone and challenged him to a fight. Let's see what you got left, Tony. Just don't call your goons on me, he said. Those close by grabbed their drinks and backed away. Everyone got ready for a fight. Pallone winked at me and turned towards the aggressor and said, I'm not Tony, I'm Jerry. Then he took a sip from his Dr. Pepper and everyone settled down and watched television again. My time with Pallone would soon come to an end. His knees burned after walks, and he had frequent headaches that kept him home. I kept boxing for a while, but his absence had me thinking the Army was a better option. After I was discharged, I went to see him a few times. Lefty was no longer around, and Pallone was walking with a limp. One time, he did not answer the door. I found out too late that he had been in a coma in Coney Island and later died. I wish I could have thanked him one more time for that favor he did for me a few years earlier. Rumors was it that it was not just toys that were being unloaded from the trucks at my job. My boss, a 70-year-old who liked boxing, asked if I had noticed anything suspicious. I kept my mouth shut. They can't do that, Pallone said when I told them they withheld my last check. How you fix, he asked. That was his way of asking if I had enough cash. I'm broke, I told him. Lefty, let's go get this kid his money. As one, the three of us rose from our seats. He always did want to meet you, I said. Geez, I wish I'd have known. I would have wore a tie today, he said. I led the way, not sure what to expect. My former boss was wearing dark shades, but I could tell from the rising arc in his eyebrows that he was shocked. He walked towards us the way one does in the dark, his complexion turning the same shade of white as his hair. I know who you are, he said to Pallone. I'm a big fan of yours. He stretched out his hands and asked what brought us there. Pallone asked, what kind of operation are you running here? My former boss mumbled. While he copped his plea, I began to realize that I had gotten more than boxing lessons from Pallone. Like a diplomat, he listened patiently. When the explaining was done, he looked him in the eye and said, you look like someone who could fix things around here. My former boss's shoulders sagged. A few seconds later, I had to check in an apology. We were halfway out the door when he called out, wait, you're Tony Pallone, right? No, he's my brother. We walked home in a triangle formation. This time I was in the back trying to keep up. The end.
That's a great Brooklyn story.
Thank you.
Oh, man. Okay. Amazingly, but according to me, we have 4 more stories. And I have to say, what an absolutely delightful way to spend this hour plus that we've spent together. So I'm really looking forward to Pia. Oh, there we are. Hi, Pia.
I'm here.
Yeah, come on.
I just had to put my video and everything back on. Hi, I'm starting. I'm starting from the middle of my story, and basically it's about my endeavors as a judicial candidate, kind of way back when. Okay, Fulton Street in downtown Brooklyn was another touchstone for me as a kid. The defunct Abraham and Straus department store, also known as A&S, advertised sales in the Daily News that enticed my mother to take the IRT number 3 train from 135th Street in Brooklyn to Hoyt in Manhattan to Hoyt Street in Brooklyn. The bustling, energized crowd was spread out on Fulton Street as we emerged from the Hoyt Street station. The stores offered value to shoppers on a budget or extravagance to shoppers willing to splurge on merchandise that compared to the value of merchandise on 34th Street in Manhattan, Fordham Road in the Bronx, or Jamaica Avenue in Queens. Inside A&S, we would use the escalator to move from floor to floor to catch the merchandise displayed at each landing. My mother and I would then leave A&S and cross Fulton Street to go inside Martin's department store. She liked shopping there because it was less crowded. After entering the store, she would stop and sample the perfume scents contained in distinct shaped bottles that lined the glass counter. Then we would go inside an elevator operated by a man or woman, always dressed pristine in a proper blue suit. After trying on an outfit or two, my mother would select a new dress for church or work that would also do double duty for Sunday Mass. She bought my first Holy Communion dress there. Then we would leave the store and cross Fulton Street again to head into Woolworth's next to A&S. Our mission was to meet up with cousin Emily, who lived in Bedford-Stuyvesant. We would wait for her near the entrance of the store. Upon her arrival, we would hug and kiss. Cousin Emily would remark, "Look how tall you're getting," as she cut my chin with the palm of her hand that always reminded me of the softness of a marshmallow against my skin. I would grab the hand of my mother and then grab the hand of cousin Emily, just to enjoy the soft comfort of her hand. The three of us would then stroll over to 3 vacant stools for lunch at the Woolworth luncheonette counter. Cousin Emily would always look at me as we sat and say, "Eating here at Woolworth beats down the street at Junior's." She would then wink at me and chuckle as she concluded, "The banana splits are a whole lot better here too." I would then look above the counter where we sat at the various colored balloons. Each balloon held a small piece of paper that revealed the price the customer would pay for the banana split. The balloon was busted open with a pin by the waitress. So after I threw my hat in the race to run for an elected office in Brooklyn, some 40 years later, I knew I had to campaign in downtown Brooklyn and at Coney Island. My campaign manager advised me, as he accepted a campaign check out of the hands of my treasurer, that I had a whole lot of Brooklyn to get to know that summer for a countywide seat election victory. The campaign strategies involved going to Brooklyn neighborhoods, which are as diverse as the globe. I was scheduled to attend almost every public event that summer. Events ranged from Family Day at NYCHA housing developments to Pride Day along Prospect Park. I had to be prepared to shake hands, dance to the summer beats that surrounded the streets, and hug those senior citizens who willingly held out their arms to me. And when I did speak, it was to be seen and not just heard. "Never refuse to shake a hand," my campaign manager shouts as I leave his office. I resign myself to the fact that shyness is not an option. As a candidate, I didn't view Coney Island as a place of amusement. It is a place to gain trust from voters during the Mermaid Parade. It becomes a place of inspiration as I observe African Americans dressed in white garb at the sea's edge, giving honor to the ancestors who came from the shores of Africa to this shore. I would identify with an old Jewish man who greeted me as he sat on a park bench in Astor Levy Park, waiting for a concert to begin with his wife, close by in a wheelchair, as her Trinidadian caregiver sits between them. He spoke emphatically that I should vote because as a young man, he could not vote. I resisted the urge to inform him gracefully that I am a candidate. Instead, I connected with him by speaking about my relatives who were denied those choices right here in America. I found myself walking, driving, standing all over Kings County. I don't act like a stranger at the Panamanian Day Parade and its picnic that follows in the park. I endear myself to the women at block parties as I taste the food they cook at the curry queues. I stand at the entrance of subway stations from 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. handing out my campaign literature because I can no longer be shy if I believe in myself and want to make a difference on the bench. I speak broken high school French to Haitian ministers at a Haitian pastor's breakfast. Every Sunday, I attend at least one church service in the community. I gained support from a Hasidic newspaper. I met with local politicians and informed them in their camp why I wanted to become a judge. I spoke with passion because as a judicial candidate, I could not make promises. I smiled because I had overcome my shyness. I shook hands in a world where hand sanitizer is not an option as you stand in front of a community center after a community meeting. I shook so many hands, strong hands, withered hands, firm hands, soft hands, hopeful hands, moist hands, calloused hands, and reluctant hands. Connections on some level were made. I was willing to take your hand so you could feel the strength of my vision. I wanted folks to know that the Brooklyn political machine does not hold a dream in its hand. The Brooklyn political machine had no hand to offer. And then one hot and humid day, I stopped at a block party on Herkimer Street where cousin Emily lived. I went inside her home. Age required that she occupy the garden floor apartment. I hug and kiss her. I then gently shake her frail hand, and it still reminds me of the softness of marshmallows. She doesn't remember me, but it doesn't matter. The handshake encourages me. My summer in Brooklyn on the campaign trail emboldened me. That summer did not allow for second guessing myself or regrets. Campaigning in summer did not allow me to ever utilize the distinct New York City survival mechanism of being blind to those around you and acting as though people are invisible. I see the neighborhoods, I see the youth, I see families, I see mom and pop businesses. I feel the energy emerge from commuters that rush down to a train station at 8:15 a.m. And I see the drained bodies that rise up from the tunneled stations at 6:45 p.m. Not caring about whether I will make a difference because the forecast for the next few days is hot, hazy, and humid. I am convinced that this borough, this Kings County, this Brooklyn has fueled me and I will win. Summer turns into fall. The Labor Day West Indian Parade on Eastern Parkway is over. During October, I see pictures of my face flutter in the autumn breeze when people discard my printed campaign literature. A few campaign cards land in the ugly, dirty street gutter water. Some endorsements have come through for me. Some pastors have blessed me and my campaign in front of their congregations, while not outright endorsing me to protect their 501c3 tax exempt status of the church. As November arrives with a chill, I still feel in my gut that I will win. And then I lost. I surmise that I lost because I underestimated the power of the county's political machine and what the absence of its blessing on my campaign meant. My campaign manager reminds me that I was a rogue candidate. He promises that next year will be different because my name is out there and there's a county seat that will be open. He points to me and huffs, "You can run again and win." He then leans back into his armchair as if he has pounded those streets and shook the hands that pulsated my heart's dream that I could make a difference. Martin's department store went out of business in 1979. A&S became part of the Federated Department Stores in 1995. Woolworth on Fulton Street closed in 1997. Cousin Emily died from a heart attack a couple of years ago. Disney had explored taking over parcels of Coney Island. The D train needs upgrading and more security. But I win. I won because of all of those Brooklynites that I connected with by the smallest gesture of shaking hands. That made me a better person. And after all, isn't becoming a better person the ultimate success? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Nicole Bulanchuk. Am I saying that right? Could
Yeah.
you say your name?
So it's Ukrainian. It's actually Bulanchuk, but you could say Bulanchuk. That's okay too.
Okay.
But this one's probably a bit of a different mood than the other ones, but hopefully you all like it still. Staring directly into her own golden eyes in the mirror, neither recognizing herself nor appreciating who she could be. She aspired to feel and think nothing. Her mirror reflected who she was not. At this moment, her eyes glistened with agony and hopelessness. She needed to feel numb, nothingness, and evidently the kiss of silence in her mind, freedom from herself, peace, eternally. Her mind ran back and forth in that tiny bathroom in Brooklyn. She romanticized this night for too long, leaving everything, becoming nothing but a tragic memory. She would at last not have to worry about being alone. Depression would be a distant pastime for her disgraceful, pathetic life. Oh my, what a wonderful feeling that may be to not feel worthless, lonely, nor disgusted with herself, and to potentially be good enough for something. The end. Tonight was the night. She had planned this for a long time. Here it waited in her mirror cabinet upon her tiny bathroom wall, sitting in an innocent bottle waiting to be her piece. Reassuring herself, she was confident she had enough to be successful. All the regrets, farewells, goodbyes, apologies, handwritten and placed in envelopes. They were neatly stored in the second drawer of her vintage desk, a manila folder titled, "Please send when found." She moved her pills to the sink and checked her phone one final time. No calls, no texts, no snaps, nothing. No one cares, alone. Meanwhile, the bottle was tempting her next to the soap. As if she was speaking all the relief she craved. This is what you wanted. Now you will finally move on. This is what you deserve. Now you will finally be gone. You deserve this. Enraged, she smacked her portrait in the mirror and fell to the floor. Curled against the tub, knees against her breasts, and her butt fully exposed, she wept. With the intensity of the hit, Sink shook aggressively and the pill bottle, along with her phone, fell alongside her. She tried to calm down before her departure. Her phone laid screen down, likely shattered, next to the piece which was on its side, rocking back and forth on the cold bathroom tile. Grabbing the bottle, she held it tightly while she trembled. Suddenly, the tile vibrated. Confused, she wiped her tears and snotty drips from her face, then noticed her phone. She crawled across the tile, picked it up, undamaged. She was getting a call from an old friend. She wiped her eyes, and on the last ring, she slid the screen unlocked. Hello? Hey, Nick, what's up? Oh, well, I couldn't tell him the truth. I was planning to go out, but I think I might stay in. I'm surprised you called. I'm sorry about the last time we spoke. To be honest, no one has ever told me what you said, and I didn't know how to handle it. Oh, I never stopped thinking about you. When you told me what happened, I'm hoping you're okay and getting better, finding your peace or anything. I read about these feelings since we last spoke, and I think I understand it more than I did. I know you feel really misunderstood and alone. Well, you're not alone. You at least have me. Thank you, now I understand. Now I understand more than anything. And oh my God, I'm so sorry. I really am. I didn't mean to be awkward when you explained the whole thing, I'm sorry that must have hurt. You confided in me and I was really unhelpful and distant. I panicked, I froze, and I'm sorry. It's okay. I gripped the bottle of my piece tighter. Is it okay? Are you okay? I should have called sooner. I'm sorry. I really meant to call a few weeks ago, but somehow I got the urge to call tonight, so hey. Unable to think straight, I said with a raspy voice, "So what's up tonight?" "You don't sound okay," he said. "Were you crying?" I cleared my throat. He said again, "Please tell me what's on your mind, please." I craved this peace. I mumbled, "I'm okay. Please talk to me." I couldn't say another word to him. "Please," he begged. I sighed. I guess I'll try again. Eric, I want to die more than anything. I want to feel and think nothing. And there was a loud silence. Finally, he stuttered. Thank you for telling me that again. I'm so sorry you feel this way. After all this time, I'm so sorry. Did you ever talk to someone, a professional? I just want you to know that life may seem really bad, but it'll pass. It always does. Yes, I've seen a professional. Doesn't help me. I'm sorry too for this conversation. I'm depressing, I know. And there's a lot of reasons why, I told him. Okay, look, what are you doing right now? He said. I looked down at my peace bottle. I gently placed the bottle on the ledge of the tub. Sitting, I said. Please just go out tonight, for me, please. Who knows what might happen? It might be the best night of your life. I wanted to cry again as he spoke, and I stared at myself in the mirror with my phone pressed to my ear. His pleas pierced my heart. My eyes watered. What did he know about how I felt, what I thought, what I experienced? What did anyone know? I do want to be better. I want to try, but I can't escape these echoes in my head. I looked so broken in the mirror at that moment. I imagined cracking my skull against the mirror and suffering through the blood loss, finding comfort in the way the streams of blood ran through the light tiles and down the main hallway of my apartment. Peace. Eric blurted, leave now. Go have fun. Dance your ass off. Please go, for me. Fine, I yelled, for you. Okay, good. You'll be okay. I know you will. God, you're just so amazing and unique. I really hope you realize that. Please don't hurt yourself. I took a pause, then said, thank you. I hope you have a good night too. In Jersey, as fun as that could be. I laughed calmly, and shortly after, he did too. Yeah, I miss Brooklyn, and I miss you. Anyway, go, have fun, and be safe. Okay, I'll try. Thank you, Eric. Talk tomorrow? Promise, he said, and patiently waited for a response. After a few moments, I said, I promise. The call ended, and I picked up the poison pills from the tub ledge and brought them to my room. I was exhausted from my own reflection. I never told him this, but I think over time he knew. Eric, you saved my life that night. Thank you. And that's it.
Beautiful story, Nicole. Thank you. Linda Bakst. I see side by side on the double L.
Yes, side by side on the LL. Tough to follow that piece, Nicole. That was heartbreaking. Side by side on the LL. Rockaway Parkway was my subway station, where I got on the LL, today the L, to go to the city. In Brooklyn, we referred to Manhattan as the city. End to end, the LL traveled from Canarsie as a mostly elevated line through Brooklyn and ended up at 8th Avenue and 14th Street, the upper reaches of Greenwich Village. I rode that line countless times growing up in the late 60s and 70s. After the train left Canarsie, it headed into East New York, followed by Brownsville, went underground in Bushwick, continued on to Greenpoint and Williamsburg. It traveled under the East River and emerged in Manhattan. In the 1970s, it amounted to a grand tour of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Brooklyn. The LL sat at the open-air Rockaway Parkway station waiting for passengers, the trains arriving and leaving the station according to some mysterious, unpredictable schedule. The cars were covered inside and out with graffiti. It looked and felt like chaos. Aside from the physical appearance, the trains were unreliable. Countless times it would lurch into a station along the route, followed by a garbled announcement that it was going out of service. I heard the collective groan of my fellow travelers. Everyone would exit and crowd on the platform to wait for the next one. Standing in the bitter cold or sweltering heat, it never seemed to be a moderate temperature. I tried to place myself strategically so that the doors would open in front of me. This was not a time to be timid. When the doors opened, I readied my elbows and walked with purpose to claim my spot. This is how a New Yorker is made. I rode that subway line acutely aware of the danger. In the 70s, when it was on the brink of bankruptcy, New York City was the murder capital of the world. Muggings were common. On the subways, chain snatching, where a person would grab hold of a necklace and yank it off, fleeing as the doors slid shut, became a fad. We put our jewelry in our purses and held them close to our chests. When we arrived at our destination, we put our rings and necklaces back on. Since the LL traveled above ground, I could see the pigeons perched on the fire escapes of the tired tenements that abutted the tracks. I watched the subway doors open and looked at the people who got on the train from those stations. Almost all were brown and black, joining the white folks who had boarded in Canarsie. My neighborhood was 80% white. In fact, the block where I lived was 100% white. I wondered about the lives of those who got on the train at New Lots Avenue, how it was for them to live in a neighborhood with such a bad reputation. Here we were, side by side, but living in different worlds. I was 12 years old the first time my friend Deborah and I took the LL, just the two of us, into Greenwich Village. We emerged from the station to see a protest, people carrying signs, chanting, marching in a circle. We didn't know what they were protesting, but we thought it was the coolest thing in the world. It scared us at the same time. We looked around and quickly headed away from the hubbub, looking for bookstores, of which there were many. When I was 16, I got on the LL by myself to go to downtown Brooklyn to apply for my learner's permit. There was only one Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV, office to service all of Brooklyn, and the DMV was spectacularly inefficient, so you had to plan to spend hours there. After I got on the train, I realized I had forgotten my birth certificate. I was too afraid to get off at any of the stops until Broadway Junction. I wouldn't turn around at 105th Street, New Lots, Livonia, Sutter, or Atlantic Avenues, 5 extra stops. Each time the doors opened, I looked at the platform and thought, should I risk it? Each time I decided I wouldn't. Even though it added so much time to my trip, I wouldn't take the chance. In my travels from Canarsie, I frequently changed trains at Broadway Junction, where the A and C lines met the LL. I descended the stairs from the elevated platform, took a deep breath, and held it as I walked as quickly as possible through the underground passageway, which was damp and reeked of urine. I gulped the fresher air when I got to the other side. One late afternoon, I was riding the LL when there was an announcement over the PA. Those announcements were usually so staticky as to be indecipherable, but this one came through quite clearly. Move away from the windows. There are reports of gunfire. Move away from the windows. There weren't very many of us on the train at the time. Most of the people looked incredulous. A few moved to the windows to see. Some ignored the message entirely. I shifted down on the bench so the wall of the subway car was behind my head. Fortunately, nothing happened. Riding the L today reveals almost a whole new Brooklyn. Several neighborhoods have gentrified, especially Williamsburg and Greenpoint. Parts of Bushwick have become desirable real estate as well. Brownsville and East New York are still impoverished. Compared to the 1970s, the crime rate has fallen all over Brooklyn, but the problems in those communities persist. The neighborhood of my youth, Canarsie, has also changed. Though it is still middle and working class, the racial composition has flipped. Today, it is 90% Black. The more things change, though, the more they remain the same. People living side by side, riding the L, the haves and the have-nots, perhaps still leading segregated lives.
Thank you, Linda. And that was penultimate. So our ultimate reader is Alberta Nassi. Alberta, thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much. It's an honor. Treif. Grandma Yetta leaped to her death from the ledge of her Brooklyn apartment at the age of 67, her slippers placed neatly beneath the windowsill. Her crumpled remains were found on the street below. 2 months earlier, my father, her son-in-law, had suffered a fatal heart attack on a Southern California tennis court. Ravaged by grief, my grandmother could not reconcile that my father's sudden death had defied the natural order. Mothers, even mothers-in-law, were supposed to predecease their children, not the other way around. The Torah designates a unique word for a parent who survives her child, shakul, because it is a pain that never leaves. In a long-distance phone call, my mother's twin, Aunt Esther, broke the news to us. She waited until after the burial, certain we could not withstand another funeral, let alone another loss. She stuck by the tale that my grandmother, physically frail, weighing under 100 pounds and standing less than 5 feet tall, gasped for air in the throes of a heart attack and opened the window, only to be overcome by a Brooklyn gale. I believe this deceit. I was 8, but held on to it way beyond the time I should have. My mother kept up the pretense, though I suspect she divined the truth. She clung to any consolation. The week before my grandmother died, she sat down to Thanksgiving dinner with Aunt Esther, Uncle Sid, and my cousin Joyce at their nearby apartment on Nostrand Avenue. After dinner, Joyce visited her girlfriend, whose mother generously donated a care package from their Thanksgiving feast containing baked ham. My aunt and cousin coveted the forbidden delicacy, but never bought or prepared it themselves. Unlike my grandmother, my aunt and uncle didn't keep kosher per se, but they drew the line at cooking treif, food that does not conform to Jewish dietary laws. Uncle Sid prepared to drive Grandma Yetta the short distance home. Don't forget the leftovers, Esther reminded her. When my grandmother unfolded the tinfoil package the next day, expecting moist turkey, she was shocked to discover the prohibited pink meat. She telephoned my Aunt Esther, bemused about the blunder. Guess what I found in my Thanksgiving leftovers? Treif! It was the only time she ever had treif in her house. Not wanting to deprive her children, Yetta ignored the biblical mandate to throw it to the dogs and stored it in the Frigidaire. After her death, it would eventually be discovered that during Thanksgiving dinner, Grandma Yetta hid her dime savings bank passbook in Esther's dresser drawer. She had closed her bank account the day before and carefully concealed the withdrawn cash with tissue and rubber bands inside the book. My grandmother was born in the late 19th century in the small town of Chochanowitz, Poland. According to family lore, she enjoyed considerable wealth. My grandmother and her 4 siblings would wait for the poor to be fed in bread lines that formed outside their home before enjoying their own meal. People on the street often murmured in Yiddish as she passed, "Es geht die Tochter von dem Milliner." There goes the millionaire's daughter. But eventually, the settlement her family owned was confiscated by Russians. One day we were Polish, the next Russian, she would sigh. In 1914, my grandparents immigrated to America as a married couple to escape mounting repression. They were prescient. Pogroms proliferated the following year, and during the Holocaust, the Jews of Chochanowitz would be exterminated at Treblinka. My grandfather Harry interrupted his rabbinical studies to labor as a sweatshop tailor in New York before moving up the ranks of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. In 3 years, they conceived 4 children, including my mother and her twin Esther. Inspired by the Russian Revolution, my grandfather threw himself into leftist causes. His absences at night and on weekends occurred routinely as part of the rigors of political life and passions his family only later understood. One night, my grandfather vanished. Frantic over his whereabouts, my grandmother discovered the truth from the dry cleaner who had been storing his clothes. He has a girlfriend, Yetta. Grandpa Harry had fallen in love with the Communist Party and a female comrade who shared his ideology and later his bed. During the Depression, my grandparents divorced. Child support was erratic and often required a court order. Emotionally and financially devastated, my grandmother never remarried. She remained in Brooklyn for most of her life, but briefly moved to Los Angeles to be closer to us. I basked in her slight graying presence, a Pall Mall never far from her lips, as she read to me from behind horn-rimmed glasses and played endless games of Go Fish. The experiment with West Coast life failed after only 6 months. Did my grandfather Harry and his comrade Celia's permanent residence in LA due to union politics play a role? My grandmother also had uncompromising standards for cleanliness and a roommate who tried her patience. She did not tolerate schmutz. What if Grandma Yetta had lived? What comfort may I have found in her compact apartment on Erasmus Street, spotless despite the residue of cigarette smoke that clung to the walls along with her secrets. Perhaps she could have provided shelter for my overwrought mother who was engulfed in grief and nervous energy. In her floral housecoat and orthopedic shoes, Grandma Yetta might have taught me to bake her signature challah with the patience that eluded my mother. She had a wicked sense of humor and would prank Joyce's friends by answering the phone, "Murphy's Mortuary." We could have laughed and consoled each other when the world closed in on us. And maybe then I wouldn't have experimented with overdoses of aspirin in elementary school. The literal translation is torn. As I stare down this, when Grandma Yetta entered life, I can only imagine what tore at her heart the night she pried open the living room window. Did loss, dislocation, and broken spirit propel her to jump? She disposed of herself like a mortally wounded animal. Laceration of viscera, multiple wounds, found in the street, her death certificate would read. In Judaism, suicide constitutes a grave sin. As a clinical psychologist, I know depression alters thinking and judgment and runs in families. Yet, something in me that she was not only buffeted by circumstance, biology, and privation. Perhaps as her progeny, I wish to believe I would have a choice, that suicide is not destiny. Yetta's resilience fell away. The word resilience derives from resolere, to leap back. She could not leap back. Thank you.
Well, everybody, congratulations. This has been an extraordinary afternoon. I have the happy task of announcing the winner, and I just want to convey, I think what we all felt was these were extraordinary stories. So before I mention those names, let's give ourselves a round of applause. We all deserve it. And by the powers vested in me, although I didn't make this choice, the winner is Alberta Nassi.
Oh my gosh!
And the runner-up is Jose Corpas's The Contender.
Oh my gosh.
Very good.
So, Alberta, congratulations. Jose, thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Everybody here,
Congratulations.
wonderful job. These stories are going to stay in my mind and heart for a long time. I hope to see everybody here next year again.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's a great, all great stories.
And congratulations to you all. Thank you.
Congrats.
Congratulations.
Great stories.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome tough.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Keep writing. Great stuff.
Keep writing.
It's-
Alberta,
Yes,
Ramin is going to send you a check.
that's so fantastic. But more than anything, it just honors my grandmother's memory. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful story.